As a podcaster, it's important to know how your podcast is performing so you can continue to make great episodes into the future. And in this video, I'm going to break down how to use your Stitcher stats to make confident decisions about your podcast. So if you have your podcast listed in Stitcher, which is one of the main podcast listening apps available right now, you have access to some unique analytics and statistics that you can't necessarily get from your podcast host. And so I'm going to show you how to find your Stitcher stats and then what to do with them. So if we start here with an example podcast in the Buzzsprout Advanced Podcast Statistics, I just said the word podcast like 50 times. Sorry about that. And scroll down to the bottom, you'll see this button here to visit the Stitcher Podcasters portal. So you simply click this button and it takes you directly there. And you can also get there by going to partners.stitcher.com/join. Now, if you haven't yet signed up to submit your podcast to Stitcher, you would click this button that says join us today, and that would start that process for you. But if you have, then you would click here, this tiny link here, to get access to your Stitcher stats. And it will automatically log you into whichever login you were using when you set up your Stitcher account. So we're going to look at how to start a podcast. So there are two different sections in Stitcher that I want to get into. The first one is your show stats. So that's the data that Stitcher has about how your show performs on their app for your entire podcast. And they also offer episode stats for individual episodes. So let's start with the show stats. Right here on the overview tab, you'll see your listening data. You can update this range to be whatever you want it to. It defaults to the last 30 days. And here you can simply see how many times somebody is listening to your podcast every single day. But here is something I want to draw your attention to. These three numbers are super helpful for you. The first one is average listening time. So how much time is someone spending listening to your podcast episodes? So on average, somebody spends 15 minutes listening to an episode of this podcast, which is actually pretty good because the episodes themselves are about 18 to 20 minutes. And so you'll see that reflected here with the average completion rate of a little over 70%. So that means on average, people are listening to 70% of each podcast episode. And obviously you want this number to be as high as possible because the more someone's listening to your episodes, the more engaged they are as listeners. But then here is another really interesting nugget that Stitcher can give you, and that's your listens to download ratio. And all that simply means is of the people that downloaded an episode of your podcast, how many of them actually played it? How many of them actually listened to that episode? And so here you can see this number is 0.56. So that means out of 100 people that downloaded an episode of How to Start a Podcast, 56 of them actually listened to that episode. If we scroll back up to the top here and you look at trends, there's a really cool chart that I want to draw your attention to, and that is day of week listening. So this chart shows you how much time people are spending listening to your podcast every single day of the week. So on Sunday, we are getting an average of 135 minutes of listen time. Our next best day is Thursday, 96 minutes. So this tells you if you have a podcast and you're publishing multiple days a week, or if you haven't really settled into a publishing cadence, this lets you know when your listeners are actually listening to your podcast. So if we were going to start producing more episodes for How to Start a Podcast, we should release them on Sunday or Thursday. That's what this data is telling you, which can be super helpful if you're trying to really dial that in. If you jump up to audience, this will break down how people are consuming your podcast on Stitcher's app, because you can get their app on Amazon Alexa devices, on Android phones, on Apple iPhones, and everything in between. Now, if you want to start to do some market research and see what other podcasts your listeners are subscribed to and listening to, this section over here will tell you that. So this tells you the top 5 podcasts that your listener also listened to. And then you can click this button down here to show even more beyond just the top 5. But when you want to dive deep into particular episodes, you go over here to the left to the episode stats. So Stitcher will display as many episodes as you put in the filter. So 10, 25, or 100. We're just going to leave it at 10. And then here you can see how many times somebody listened to each of your episodes. So let's dive deeper into episode 1 because that has the most data for us to play with. So you'll see here, you have your listens chart, very similar to the overview graph for your show. And then it also has these three numbers as well: the average listening time, average completion rate, and then listens to download ratio. So this episode does really well for listens to download. Some of that might be because it's episode 1. So if somebody is just discovering this podcast, they'll download the first episode and then start listening immediately. Whereas maybe they have it set up to download all 9 episodes, but they don't necessarily make it to episode 8 and episode 9. That could be the reason why our show listens to download ratio is lower than this. But this is what you want. Ideally, you want most people that download your episode to actually listen to it. And then you can also see your listeners graph, which is your number of active listeners over time, and your listening time as well. But unfortunately, Stitcher doesn't give you the other 2 tabs that we got with our show stats, the trends tab and the audience tab. But that's fine. This gives us a really good idea of how individual episodes are performing. And then you can look at your podcast as a whole to get the other pieces of information. So that's how you can use your Stitcher stats to better understand how your podcast is performing. You can see what day of the week your listeners prefer to listen to your show. You can see what percentage of them or what ratio of them are listening to your podcast versus downloading it. And you can see what other kinds of shows your listeners enjoy listening to. So if you're looking for collaboration opportunities or to have guests on your podcast, that would be a good source of information, knowing that those are people that your listeners want to hear from. And now that you know how to use your Stitcher stats, I want to encourage you to check out the other videos in our stats tutorial playlist, where we dive into the Buzzsprout advanced podcast statistics and all the information that's available to you there. The Apple Podcast analytics. What does Apple give you from the largest podcast listening platform on the planet? And how can you use that to better understand your audience? And then also the statistics that you would get from Spotify. So you can click the link below this video to go and check out all those additional videos as well. And if there's something that I didn't cover that you want me to go deeper into, or if you have a question about something that I talked about, feel free to leave a comment below this video and I'll do my best to answer it. But I hope this video was helpful for you. And until next time, keep podcasting.